I'm Mike.
I'm Sam. Let's get into it.
Where can this team go from here, Coach?
We'll see. We got to go beat Ole Miss next week. We'll take it one game at a time.
Congratulations.
Go Tigers.
Welcome to episode 21. And today we're going to talk about the massive NBA news about them returning to play. And also, the second half of the video, we're going to go into kind of a preview for the upcoming college football season. I mean, I feel like a lot of schools are announcing they're going back now, so that's just ever so increasing the chances that college football returns. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So NBA, a huge announcement today. They're July 31st. They're planning to return to play with 22 ready-to-play teams. So this will be 22 of the teams that are in playoff contention. So it won't be just the top 16 teams in the league, East and West. It will be those teams that are on the brink. We talked about this yesterday. We kind of thought that this was the route they were going to be in because, as you see, those teams that are like the 9th seed, the 10th seed, and they're like 4 games out. So obviously, if they weren't able to go back to the return to play and miss out on the playoffs, I feel like there would be a lot of frustrated fans and owners and GMs.
Yeah, certainly. And looking at the teams that just missed the cutoff, no really significant organizations or no significant players who are going to end up missing the potential playoff tournament. You have teams like the Hornets, the Bulls, the Knicks, the Pistons, the Hawks, the Cavaliers. Coming out of the East, they really had no chances of even making a playoff push, even though the Hornets are pretty close to the Washington Wizards in terms of their just standings and record. But getting into some of the Western teams, only 2 Western Conference teams ended up missing this potential bracket, and that was the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Golden State Warriors, both far out of contention as well. So I think they really devised a plan here to make everybody happy, to make all the teams happy, and to really give everybody who had a shot at making the playoffs just a fair shot at doing so. Yeah,
because if you were on the Warriors or the Knicks, there's no chance I would want to go back just to play 8 games. So they're allowing those teams to stay put, and then the teams that want to fight for the playoffs and will fight for the playoffs to play those 8 games, solidify the playoff rankings, and even have the higher seeded teams be able to win 8 games or lose 8 games and really change the fluctuation. Maybe, even the Clippers, who had some injury problems, hopefully, or you can see them win all 8 games and become the best team in the West, or lose all 8 games and become even worse. So who knows with that? But I think the aspect I really like about this, and we kind of touched upon it in yesterday's video, how the league is gonna have some sort of a tournament if there's a really close tie between the 8 and the 9 seed. So as you see that the NBA, if the 9 seed is within 4 games of the 8 seed, they're going to do a 2-game double elimination. So what it's kind of going to be is like a 7-game series, and they're in the 6th game of the series, and the 8th seed is winning. So if the 8th seed wins, the series is over. And then if not, they'll go to the quote-unquote 7th game of the series to be a winner-take-all. So I really like this because obviously they're not going to be able to play the whole NBA season. So coming down to this, it's 2 playoff games or 1 playoff game, and it will see which team is better.
Yeah, the first 8 to 16 games of NBA basketball we're going to see coming back, I think, are going to be very, very competitive. I think you're going to see a lot of teams. First off, I'm very interested to see how they're going to divide and just kind of figure out this 8-game schedule, who plays who, because I think teams like the Milwaukee Bucks or teams like the Los Angeles Lakers shouldn't be slated to face teams like the Phoenix Suns, like the Spurs, like the Kings, because the Lakers have all the incentives to rest their players, to really not try hard in these games, because most likely, the Lakers win 2 games and they automatically get the 1 seed. Similar situation with the Milwaukee Bucks. They could lose out and they would still most likely be the 1 seed. So I wouldn't like to see a 1-seeded team play a 9-seeded or an 8-seeded team, because I'm sure the 1-seeded team isn't going to try as hard. So I really, again, am interested to see how they're going to divide up this 8-game schedule and who is going to play who.
Yeah, I'm very curious about that, because obviously they can't go with the regular schedule, because obviously teams won't be playing the Warriors or other teams that missed out on returning to play. But what it seems to me is that they're going to kind of play basketball like an AAU tournament, they're just gonna have games all day.
Yep.
So I wonder how fast they're gonna be able to go through this. I mean, I wonder if for the first regular season 8 games for each team, they're gonna play like 8 games a day, and for the playoffs, they're gonna slow it down a lot just to have maybe one or a couple of night just to get more viewers in.
Yeah, I think they're going to take like an NBA Summer League type approach to these games where all the teams are in the same stadium at the same time and they just kind of have to sit, watch, and wait for their game to come on. I think that's how they're going to start to do the regular season. But like you said, for those elimination games to get the 8 seed, and then once we start to get into playoff basketball, which is certainly much more high stakes and much more serious, I think they'll start to slow it down, kind of spread out the location of the games, and start to figure out more stadiums in which are safe and which players could play.
Yeah, I think what I saw is they're going to, from the initial start of the return to play of the season, they're going to have 2 courts to start with. So I don't know if they're going to open that up to even more when the playoffs start. But I'm really excited to see this. Finally, we have some big sports news to talk about and hopefully to see in July. But I don't know how this is going to affect the start of next year's season with what they're going to do as well.
Yeah, I really like you touched upon it in the last video, Mark Cuban's kind of proposal where every single NBA season from this Corona just altered season is going to start later every season. I kind of like that proposal just to bring things back and get things into the fold. I'm really excited to see what the fall of sports has in store for us because the NBA got pushed back. We're going to see really just deep NBA action go into August, go into September. And I know Game 7 of the NBA Finals would be scheduled for October 12th. So we can potentially see some great NFL football, some great college football, some great baseball, and some great NBA basketball being played all at the same time. So, I mean, a really high incentive for us sports fans who have been lacking sports all this time. We might get to see all major sports leagues come back at the same time and really play important games at the same time.
Yeah, that would be a sports utopia. Everybody would just be able to watch all the games all day, do nothing. So who knows?
Yeah, hopefully fans get to go into the stadiums for a lot of these games because I know for some teams, I mean, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity for some of these fan bases to see some of their teams be so successful, like the Los Angeles Clippers, who really haven't had a lot of success in their franchise, finally get 2 superstar players, and for their fans to wait so patiently for a good team and to finally have a good team and not be able to go out and show their support certainly would be disappointed for certain fan bases. So hopefully the NBA figures out a way to at least have maybe half the capacity of the stadium be filled.
Yeah, I mean, I think they can have. I think a smart thing to do would bring fans in, and if they're in like groups, if they're traveling to the games in groups, they can sit together, but then have the rest of like 2 different groups sit a couple feet away from each other to have that social distancing.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they're going to not only screen players from day to day and game to game, but how they're going to screen certain fans from entering the stadium and not entering the stadium. That's going to be certainly something to look at, and it's going to be interesting for the future of sports.
Yeah, you wonder if they're going to take the temperature of each fan that enters the stadium.
Yeah, and I mean, I've heard that be proposed a lot, but even the problem with that and with Corona, I believe around 1 in 6 people who have Corona actually have a temperature and actually show symptoms and actually are sick. So since there's a lot asymptomatic patients of Corona, I think that certain tactic is going to be very hard. So, I mean, testing is going to have to increase in technology really significantly for sports leagues, not only to get back into the swing of things, but for fans to be also incorporated into sports leagues. And another aspect of this that I'm very interested to watch is just the ticket sale aspect of this entire thing. If certain stadiums will only, in certain leagues, only allow for half of the fan capacity to be there, I'm going to be very interested to they will sell at face value, but what the resale market for some of these tickets are going to be. I mean, we usually see NBA finals tickets go for $3,000. I could see that price tag doubling or even tripling because of Corona.
Yeah, I mean, an extremely exclusive crowd for people going to games. So I think the prices would be not for or if each team sold the ticket personally, but like if it was a secondhand market like StubHub or
Yeah.
Ticketmaster, you can see the prices of those tickets definitely increasing a lot, which would hurt the common fan.
Yeah, certainly.
So moving on to our next topic, we're going to kind of preview the college football season for the 2020 season. So obviously a lot of news with colleges. Some of them are saying they're going back, and then obviously you have the California school system saying they're not going back. And you see schools like Southern schools and even Ohio State said they would like to have some fans in the arena for the game. So who knows? But we're going to go through some of the major teams, some of the dark horses, and let's get right into it. So kind of the first team I want to talk about is obviously I want to talk about the national championships, the LSU Tigers. And you saw, if you watched the draft or if you paid attention to Ohio or LSU's roster, they had a lot of graduating and they had a lot of juniors leaving to go to the NFL draft. So they're losing a lot of their production from last year. Obviously, they're losing players like Joe Burrow, Justin Jefferson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and then on defense they're losing Patrick Queen, Grant Delpit, Javon Kinlaw. So these are some of their best players on their team, and they're losing them. So who knows what their production is going to be for the LSU Tigers next year.
Yeah, the LSU Tigers, I mean, a historic just season for the LSU Tigers and a historic turnout in the draft, like you just said. I mean, they're going to be losing a lot of players, but more importantly, they're losing their offensive and defensive coordinator to being hired to higher up positions, which, I mean, you see that a lot in college football. If a certain offensive system or defensive system really flourishes, you'll see that coordinator really be hired by the NFL or another team to be the head coach. And we saw that out of LSU. We saw Ed kind of be a figurehead for this team and really let the reins of their offense and defense be coincided with those offensive coordinators. So it's going to be really important to see how LSU's offense looks this season, because last season we saw a brand new LSU offense that really has never been seen in Baton Rouge. It's going to be really interesting to see, does LSU go back to that kind of ground and pound, less quarterback oriented offense, or are they going to really ride the wave that they did last year with some returning players like Jamar Chase, and really just be able to transition into this Joe Burrow-less era with Miles Brennan to be a passing team like they were last season?
I mean, looking at Miles Brennan did get some playing time kind of in the blowouts that LSU played last year and in the spring game, and he did look pretty promising. He has a great arm, I think, and having someone like Jamar Chase, who I think without question is the best receiver in all of college football, at your disposal will really help a young quarterback start right away. I mean, obviously LSU is in the SEC, which is one of the hardest, or not one of the hardest, is the hardest conference in all of college football. I mean, he has to play Alabama. He has to play teams like Texas A&M. I mean, and I think LSU plays Georgia this year as well, which is Georgia's always top 5 team as of recent years. But I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Coach O can lead the troops and follow up on this national championship team.
Yeah, I mean, LSU Tigers certainly still have a tremendous amount of talent on their roster. They still have Terrence Marshall, who's a really good running back, and they end up replacing Thaddeus Moss, a tight end who did a lot of things for them last season, not only in the pass catching game, but he was also a very good blocking tight end. They bring in a 5-star recruit freshman, Eric Gilbert, at tight end, who, I mean, is expected to be even better than Moss is. So it's going to be really interesting to see this new LSU team, if they resort to the old LSU tendencies or they ride the wave of this passing juggernaut that they were.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. But going to the next, I kind of want to talk about the trident of like the top 3 teams in the league. I mean, I think you can group them above everybody else. You have Clemson, Ohio State, and then Alabama. Obviously, Alabama's always a powerhouse. But first, let's get into Clemson. So obviously, they have Trevor Lawrence returning for probably his last season, his junior season. I mean, I think personally, there's a lot of weight for Trevor Lawrence going into the season. Obviously, he got blown out against LSU. A lot of people are questioning his ability and his clutchness in larger games. He didn't play that great in the first half of the Ohio State game. But also Justin Ross, probably his number one receiver for going into next year, is out for the year, so he has a lot of unproven weapons around him. But I think obviously being in the ACC, they're going to win the ACC. I think they're a shoo-in to make the college football playoff. But I'm just interested to see how they can play once they reach that college football playoff.
Yeah, I mean, Clemson has made an appearance in the last 5 college football playoffs, and I mean, they've won 2 out of the last 4 national titles, so Clemson's going to be in the swing of things anyway, regardless of their, again, roster turnover. I know they lost a lot of not only key defensive players, but they lost a lot on the offensive line, which I think that's really something to look for come this season for Clemson. Really just the health of Trevor Lawrence. Is he going to be able to get better even though he's such a great talent? I think that was a big question mark surrounding him last season. He kind of regressed in some of his tendencies because he does rely so much on his talent. Like you said, he lost his key wide receiver to a bad neck injury, I believe. But I mean, they lost again players like Isaiah Simmons on the defensive end, but they have a great coach. They have a great system with Sweeney leading the charge. So, I mean, they're certainly the best team going into next season. And it's going to be really interesting to see if Trevor Lawrence could be a Heisman favorite going into next season.
Yeah, I think for Lawrence, really having Travis Etienne, the running back, returning for his senior season, that shocked a lot of people. I mean, I think he's one of the best he's one of the best running backs in all of college football right now. So having Etienne return and kind of being a safety blanket is really going to help him out. But obviously, according to 247 Sports, they have Brian Brees, the number 1 prospect, a D tackle. He's going to be probably start right away. He's going to be a force on that defensive line for the next 3 years. But also, Clemson, easy schedule, but also they're traveling to Notre Dame this year, which is a very rare matchup. I'm really, really excited to see because Notre Dame, probably a top 10 team in this country this year, so I'm excited to see Clemson kind of play a harder opponent in the regular season.
Yeah, they certainly should have a tougher schedule than they did last season. And I mean, considering they are in the ACC, usually they don't have too much competition in the ACC. They are going to be playing teams like North Carolina again, who really gave them a fit last season. So it's going to be interesting to see not only I would assume Clemson's going to be far and away the best team in the ACC, but it's going to be interesting to see if any teams like North Carolina could give them a run for money in their division.
Yeah. Moving on to the next team, we're going to go into my Ohio State Buckeyes. So obviously the big part of the Ohio State team going into this year is just their weapons on offense. Obviously they have Justin Fields returning for his junior season, probably going to be his last season. And I think a lot of Vegas bettors have him as the Heisman favorite going into this year. But just looking at the weapons around him, he has Chris Olave returning for his junior season, top 5 wide receiver. They have Garrett Wilson, who as a sophomore, he's going to be really helpful. And then they have just the wide receivers that they're bringing in as freshmen this year, Julian Fleming, Guy Scott, and then they have 2 others. I think that's going to really help Justin Fields a lot. I mean, a lot of people question his ability, but having that many weapons around him is really going to help him.
Yeah, I mean, they're not having a lot of returning starters. Again, they did lose J.K. Dobbins, a great running back for them, to the NFL draft, but they did bolster their backfield with getting guys like a Oklahoma transfer and Trey Sermon, who is going to handle the bulk of the carries for Ohio State. I mean, this Ohio State program on the field of on the back of Justin Fields, I mean, they're going to be a very good team again. And a thing to look forward to for Ohio State certainly is going to be Justin Fields, because he's proven to be a very great high school talent, a very good player at Ohio State, but I don't think he's proven just enough yet to warrant a top 10, top 15 pick for an NFL team. So I'm really going to be looking forward to watching Justin Fields and his progression and to see if he could be molded into more of a pro-style quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I love Justin Fields, but I think he needs to show a lot this season because he has a very young roster around him. I mean, besides Chris Olave and Trey Sermon at running back, he just has a really young team, and he needs to be able to rally those troops on offense. And, I mean, the Big Ten, there's bad teams, obviously, but there's bad teams in every conference. He's going to have to travel to Michigan to play them. He's going to have to play Michigan State, Penn State. It's going to be it's going to be a fun season to watch and really intriguing to see this storyline.
Yeah, I mean, more so for the Ohio State offense. I'm really looking forward to see what the Ohio State defense does. I mean, they lost Chase Young. They lost Damon Arnett. They lost Jeff Okudah. They lost Jordan Fuller. And, I mean, they lost Malik Harrison. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they do against teams like Penn State, who usually are an offensive juggernaut. And especially I'm looking forward to watching them play Oregon at September 12th. I mean, I think that's going to be a great game. Oregon always has a very fun and exciting offense. I know they lost Justin Herbert, but that's going to be a very good game. And that's going to be an immediate test for Ohio State. And that's really going to give us, the fans, really a good projection to see where Ohio State football will be come this year.
Yeah, I mean, with the Oregon game, I don't think Oregon said that they're going to go back this year for school. So you wonder if Oregon has to travel to Ohio State or even play at a neutral site. So who knows with that game. And also with the defense, I think you can see someone like Sean Wade at cornerback or Zach Harrison at DN kind of rise to the occasion and be those next great Ohio State defensive players.
Certainly.
So moving on to the next top-tier team, Alabama. Obviously, Alabama missing the college football playoff for the first time, I think, in history. I think they made each year. But a lot of questions going into this year. Obviously, the biggest storyline, losing Tua and having kind of a quarterback controversy or competition with Mac Jones, and then 247's number 2 recruit in the country, Bryce Young. So who do you think will be the quarterback going into next year?
I think they're certainly going to just go into next year with Mac Jones. We saw him play in some big games last year, and he played pretty well. I mean, nothing eye-popping, no NFL prospect type play out of Mac Jones, but I mean, he has one of the best receiving cores in the NFL, like Alabama, or in college football, like Alabama does year in and year out. So Alabama, like they never do, they're never going to ask their quarterback of too much. So I think they're going to transition into this Tua-less era into Mac Jones, but I mean, certainly see Bryce Young in some early packages for Alabama, and certainly do not be surprised if Mac Jones is a little bit banged up or Mac Jones isn't playing too well. Alabama falls in a couple of their early games to teams like Auburn or teams like LSU. Certainly see them transition right away to their freshman Bryce Young.
Yeah, I mean, Mac Jones, obviously he started the Auburn game last year and he lost that. And that just ended their season really for making the playoff. But I think him having someone like Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith, and Najee Harris returning for his senior season is really going to help him kind of take away those butterflies, because we talked about this point for Justin Fields having that weapons. Mac Jones having those weapons is really going to make kind of some of his flaws look better than they actually are.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just say Alabama really fell last year because of Tua getting injured, and I would kind of disagree with that, because we haven't seen Alabama's defense be as bad as they were last season. Now, granted, their standard for defense is extremely high. I believe they only gave up 18.6 points a game per contest, but that's their low in 5 to 10 years. So I think the main and the first thing for Alabama and Tuscaloosa to do to really get back into that top 4, which they're expected to be in, is to bolster that defense and to not only personnel-wise but schematically get back to that great defense that we usually see out of Alabama. And if that happens, I don't think there's going to be really a quarterback controversy, because no matter if Mac Jones is under center or Bryce Young is under center, it's not going to really matter, because they're going to be led by that great defense.
Yeah, I mean, they had players like Josh McMillan and Dylan Moses returning for their senior seasons. I mean, that was really big for them, because, I mean, if you lose some of those key players, it kind of can hurt you a lot. But also another point I want to bring up is Alabama was so successful with mediocre quarterbacks in previous years. I mean, A.J. McCarron, Jalen Hurts. So Mac Jones isn't really that far from the tree.
Yep, certainly. And, I mean, like Ohio State, Alabama even more so is going to be tested right away. I believe they play USC and Georgia in September. And, I mean, they're going to have Auburn and Texas A&M come to Alabama. But, I mean, mark that November 7th date, because they're going to be playing LSU at Baton Rouge. So that's certainly going to be tough. Alabama, a very, very tough schedule this year. And if they end up making the college football playoffs, I would expect it to be with 1 or 2 losses.
Yeah. So any teams that stick out to you really when you're looking at the best teams in the league? Or in
I mean,
college?
of course, year in and year out, you're going to have Lincoln Riley's led Oklahoma. I mean, since replacing Bob Stoops and using 3 different starting quarterbacks, I mean, he's led the Sooners to 3 Big 12 titles and, I mean, 3 trips to the college football playoffs. So, I mean, even though Jalen Hurts had a great 2019 season, I think that was more because of Lincoln Riley and his offensive system rather than how great Jalen Hurts has been. I mean, it's incredible that the last 3 years he's turned out 3 NFL quarterbacks being drafted in the first 2 rounds, 2 of which being the number 1 pick. So, I mean, expect whoever is under center for Oklahoma next season to, I mean, even have a great season. And I believe it will be Spencer Rattler.
Yeah, I mean, when looking at college football history, when was there a time that a head coach was able to have 3 Heisman finalists in a row and actually 2 of them winning the Heisman, like you said? I mean, Spencer Rattler, personally, I'm not a fan of him. I mean, he's an exceptional quarterback. I think he was a 4-star and might have been a 5-star coming out of high school. But Lincoln Riley, having someone like that ability at quarterback right away is going to be really helpful. Obviously, he had Jalen Hurts, who has his flaws in his game, and he had someone like Baker, who also has his flaws. I mean, Baker was a walk-on. He wasn't a 5-star recruit like Spencer Rattler is. So I'm excited to see Spencer Rattler in the Big 12. I mean, high-scoring games, and the road of the Big 12 always is going to run through Oklahoma for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and I mean, going off that point, they don't even have that tough of a schedule. I know they do play Iowa State on the road, and Iowa's always tough at home, but I mean, they do have teams like Oklahoma State, Baylor, and Tennessee all coming to Oklahoma to play. But I mean, again, this team did have a pretty good show out in the NFL draft, getting players like Kenneth Murray, and I mean, their defensive tackle, Neville Gallimore, getting drafted. So they do have some big shoes to fill on that defensive side. I mean, they gave up a good amount of points per game last year. So, I mean, Oklahoma, like they usually do, they're going to rely on that potent offense to lead them to victories.
Yeah. 2 teams that really stick out to me, kind of dark horses going into next year, and it is the Minnesota Golden Gophers and the North Carolina Tar Heels. We're going to the Minnesota first. So obviously we have PJ Fleck. I think he's one of the best college football head coaches in the whole nation. I mean, he's going into his 4th season, so you're going to see him getting more and more of his recruits playing time this year. And I mean, he's coming off an 11-win season. They went 11-2. They were on the brink of making the Big Ten championship. But I'm really excited to see what Minnesota can do. I mean, they have one of the best quarterback wide receiver connections in all of college football with Tanner Morgan and Rashad Bateman. I mean, they're going to be really fun to watch next year.
Yeah, I mean, Rashad Bateman was one of the best receivers in all of college football. He had 60 catches for around 1,200 yards. And, I mean, Tanner Morgan's certainly going to be a quarterback to look for. 30 touchdowns, not a lot of interceptions. And, I mean, they ended up winning 11 games last year, and no one really expected Minnesota to have that breakout 2019 campaign. So, I mean, riding on the back of a pretty good recruiting class as well. I mean, really just see them to keep improving, and their defense is also very good. They only gave up 22.5 points per game last year. So, I mean, though losing players like Antonio Winfield Jr. to their defense, which, I mean, is a big blow, not only expect Minnesota's offense to be great, but their defense is very good as well. And I definitely like them as well as Sam does to be a dark horse going into the next season.
Yeah, and then obviously coming out of the Big Ten West, that's the kind of the weaker part of the Big Ten. And always playing outside in Minnesota. I mean, I think football should be played outside if you're in Minnesota, and how cold it is going to be in some of those later games. It's a real home field advantage for them.
Yeah, and I mean, they're bringing back all their offensive players, really of note. I know they're missing one wide receiver, but besides that, I mean, they're bringing back, again, their best receiver, their quarterback, their running back, and they have all 5 offensive linemen set to return. So that's going to be huge for them.
Yeah, it's going to be – I think they're going to – I can see them being at the end of the year being on the brink of the college football playoff.
Certainly. I mean, even with teams like Nebraska and Purdue kind of being worse than expected last season and not really having high hopes coming into this season, certainly expect Minnesota to come out of that West division.
Yeah. And another team I want to go into, they're kind of a dark horse I think they're going to be mid-ranked, mid-teens ranked this year, but I think going into the year after this year, they're going to be a top 10 team, and that is the North Carolina Tar Heels. I mean, obviously they have Mac Brown at head coach. Everybody knows his success at Texas, winning the national championship in 2003, upsetting those famed USC Trojans with Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart. But just having quarterback Sam Howell going into his second season, I mean, he was a true freshman last year, and he just put up exceptional stats. And, I mean, he has a veteran wide receiver in Daz Newsome going into the senior season. I mean, you saw the connection they established last year, and, I mean, that can only probably get better going into this year. I'm just really excited to see these North Carolina Tar Heels play in the weak ACC and give Clemson a run for their money.
Yeah, I mean, right away, when you watch the North Carolina Tar Heels play, the first thing you'll notice is that great backfield that they have, led by Sam Howell, just a really outstanding quarterback last year. And, I mean, he's going to even get better as a sophomore, being a freshman and being that good. Not only that, but having Michael Carter and Javonte Williams being that 1-2 punch in the backfield, I mean, that's going to be huge for them. I mean, in 2018, that defense was very, very bad, and that's really always been North Carolina's problem. They've always given a lot of points on defense. They gave up 35 points a game in 2018, and they ended up cutting that to 23 points a game last season. I mean, even with playing some great teams last season, they're able to only give up about 3 to 4 touchdowns a game. So, I mean, that's going to be really important for them. They're going to be playing UFC and Auburn, which is really tough for a non-conference schedule. And, I mean, they're going to have Virginia and Miami away. So we're going to see very quickly what this North Carolina team is always about, because they always, or this season, they're going to have a talented roster, but they're playing some very, very good programs as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be a big test for them. And if they come out victorious in some of those games, it's going to show how for real they are. And, I mean, I think they're going to win the ACC Coastal Division, and I think they're going to play Clemson in the ACC Championship game. I mean, last year they lost to Clemson on a failed 2-point conversion. I know kind of in the middle of the season, Clemson kind of just took their foot off the gas for some reason. They had a lot of closer games that should have been blowouts, but I'm excited to see the future in Chapel Hill.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Clemson is 1 or 2 injuries away with guys like Travis Etienne or Trevor Lawrence. I mean, one of those guys, if they end up getting injured, I can see North Carolina coming out of that conference as the best team.
Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for watching. Let us know what you think are the best teams in college football, or if there are any other dark horse teams you think. But we really hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you in the next one.